The Heavenly Demon. Can't Live a Normal Life. By Sanchin. Chapter 51. If you start something, you must see its end. Part 1. The rumors spread incredibly fast. The shocking news was that Lawrence defeated Barco in the Battle of Great Warriors. When people from the northeast region of the kingdom got together, they naturally gossiped about what happened in Lawrence. Really, it must be frustrating for Barco. They made a huge fuss and then lost to Lawrence. But is that really true? They are saying that Roman attacked the enemy's rear alone and slaughtered hundreds of their soldiers at once. Of course, it's true. You know my relatives are natives of Lawrence, right? I heard it from relatives. From what they witnessed from the wall, Roman appeared like the savior of Lawrence. In an emergency situation where the wall might have collapsed at any given moment, Roman Dimitri attacked the enemy and slaughtered the soldiers of Barco. Moreover, he completely reversed the atmosphere by destroying the flare. If Roman hadn't appeared, Barco would have planted their flag in Lawrence by now. Rumors are always a mixture of truth and a bit of fiction, just like a heroic tale passed down from generation to generation. Just like those two people were talking, many people in the northeast region praised Roman's achievements. This war started with Roman Dimitri and ended with him as well. This is a story only those who were there know, but after Chris, the vanguard, won the first battle, the people of Lawrence were in complete despair. Do you know who showed up? Homer, the 49th ranker in the Cairo kingdom, came out as a great warrior for Barco. The moment he revealed his name, the people of Lawrence fell into despair. And in a fight that no one believed could be won, they thought Roman should step back and save his own life, at least. However, the man continued with a complicated expression. He spread his arms wide and spoke as if he was Roman himself. Roman Dimitri, no. The hero's judgment was different from the ordinary people's. He proudly declared that he would fight, and in front of many others, Roman Dimitri beheaded Homer with a single attack. His red blood spilled in the air. It was such an amazing scene. Roman Dimitri, who had even led Lawrence to victory against the siege, ended the battle with that fight. But you weren't there at the time. No, I am just telling you what my relatives said. Anyway, to say the least, Roman Dimitri isn't a fool, contrary to what others say. He subdued Blood Fawn by himself, took down Barco's warrior, and now helped Lawrence, as well. He is definitely a hero. A sleeping dragon, which the Dimitri family had initially kept as a secret, finally ascended to heaven and is now building up heroic stories earnestly. Everyone was excited. Roman's actions were so great that they were impressive to everyone. The rumors had spread so widely that one could see the children running on the streets play the role of Roman Dimitri. However, things didn't end just there. Lawrence had emerged victorious in all three battles in the Battle of Great Warriors. Although Roman's impact was immense, there was also the critical point that the other two fights were won by Roman's soldiers, as well. Heroes are really born with good fortune on their side. Dimitri's genius swordsman, Chris, defeated Jansen, a 3-star swordsman, and the child who hardly even looked like a soldier mutilated Barco's knight. None of Lawrence's men even took part in the battles. Roman soldiers were the ones who proclaimed the victory, and they proved their loyalty to Roman in front of everyone. Things will honestly get messy in the future. In the Northeast region, a talented person who will shock the world is finally born after a long time. Flora's predictions were correct. This war was won by the sacrifice of Lawrence, but all the glory went to Roman. However, no one complained. The battle for victory that would shape their entire lives, the people of Lawrence didn't truly know how fortunate they were to emerge victorious even if they got hurt in the war. It was over for him now. No other words could describe his current situation. Viscount Barco, who returned to the family after suffering defeat in the Battle of Great Warriors, looked like someone who had drowned in a pool of despair. Papers were piled up on his desk. Their content was already clear to him. The Golden Bank must be asking how he would repay the principal amount in the future after his defeat in this territorial war. Also, the Cairo Mercenary Guild was angry about the death of Homer and wanted him to pay the penalty. The Mercenary Guild's reasoning was truly absurd, though. They said that Barco had informed them that the opponent would be a 2-star Knight of Lawrence when they made their request for a warrior, so they shifted the loss of their man onto Barco now. In short, everyone utterly despised Barco. The fact that Barco would fall into the abyss with this defeat was known to everyone, and they all wanted something. These fucking beggars. It was bittersweet. It wasn't just these two who ignored him. Once the war was over, none of the nobles, who were earlier friendly and greeted him with a warm smile every time they met, answered his calls. Moreover, some rumors even stated they had sided with Dmitri now. That was the cold reality in front of him. Obviously, the current behavior of those who initially sided with Barco when he gained fame and became an influential leader in the Northeast region seemed disgusting to him now. However, he understood that power is what brings others' interest in someone. Viscount Barco was also someone who lived on the edge of the cliff like that, so he could only smile when he realized that he had been thrown off the cliff. What the hell does this even mean? The burden of defeat was weighing down his shoulders. It was unsettling. He was in a situation in which he could neither think of how to pay his debt off nor how he could recover from the defeat. It was because he was certain of his victory. If only Roman Dmitri hadn't come into and shattered his equation, Barco would have been drinking champagne, enjoying his victory. Right, this is all because of that fucking bastard, Roman Dmitri. He showed up with no reason to intervene in the war and ruined everything. This is absurd. In the noble society, where having a cause is critical, Roman Dmitri did something he shouldn't have. Roman, it all happened because of him. Viscount Barco thought, in order for the Barco family, who has been driven to the edge of destruction, to survive, I must hold on to Roman's existence. This is my last chance. He jumped up from his seat. Now, he had only one hope left. Clearly, there was a lot of work he needed to do. Viscount Barco contacted all the nobles of the Northeast. Some nobles accepted. Although they were reluctant to talk to him, they accepted it due to his earnest request. And a few days later, those nobles gathered in the Barco estate. If it had been the past, everyone except the Pro-Dmitri would have expressed their intention to attend, but today, only 10 nobles were seated at the huge round table. It was a scene that unquestionably showed who the weak side was. Still, Viscount Barco stood tall and said, "Before we start, I want to say thank everyone for coming to Barco. You all are true nobles. Despite those who turned their backs on us instantly and ignored our relationship according to their interests, I think the Northeast region's future can still be considered bright because of nobles like you. Ahem. Let's begin the meeting." The nobles attending the meeting didn't like the compliments from Viscount Barco. They were all here because they knew their relationship with Dmitri wasn't good, however, they knew how dangerous this move was. Then, Viscount Barco said, "I will get straight to the point. A cause is critical in a fight between nobles. In particular, in a situation where one doesn't know when a foreign invasion might happen, attacking the surrounding territory just because one is greedy violates the laws set for nobles. Barco attacked Lawrence with a good cause. It was to take back the debt they owed our ancestors, and the central government, which judged our cause to be valid, sent down a judge. However, Roman Dmitri intervened in the war without any cause. Due to his surprise attack, Barco lost their flair, and furthermore, the fighters of Lawrence remained untouched in the battle of great warriors. His voice eventually rose. It was a demand for others to show him sympathy. Does this make any sense? Why did Roman Dmitri come to help Lawrence? There would have been no problem if the two families had some kind of ties, but the Lawrence family declared that Flora Lawrence had broken the marriage with Roman Dmitri. However, Roman Dmitri still sided with Lawrence despite having no cause to help them. His behavior has crossed the line. Even though we had taken the help of those around us for the war, we fought with the troops of Barco till the very end to honor the values of nobles. Thus, this horrendous defeat is unjustifiable. What you have said is truly correct. That's right. Roman Dmitri had no cause to intervene. Everyone agreed with him. The statements Viscount Barco had said weren't incorrect. Intervention without cause deserved punishment. Thus, this was an issue that had to be discussed publicly. I don't think this will entirely destroy the Dmitri family. However, I can hold them accountable for their actions and demand a massive amount of compensation from them instead. That will be enough. Considering the Dmitri family's wealth, I can definitely pay off the money I borrowed from the Golden Bank. The Golden Bank was the most urgent matter now. The issues with the Mercenary Guild could be resolved through arguments. However, the Golden Bank was famous for being strict when it came to recovering the principal they lent. What if Barco said he cannot pay? Undoubtedly, the Golden Bank would crush the Barco family. A noble asked, "So, what do you plan to do?" Everyone's opinion was similar. Just seeing the nobles who were interested and expressed their distaste at Roman Dimitri's actions, Barco understood that his words had worked. Viscount Barco was aiming to create a voice that would sympathize with him and put pressure on Dmitri with the people who had gathered here. First. Just then, the conference room's door was slammed open by a soldier. When Viscount Barco looked at the pale-looking soldier, who was nervous, the soldier spoke, stuttering, "Our Roman Dmitri. He has come to meet the Viscount." This was an unexpected situation that did not make any sense to Viscount Barco. Roman Dmitri, the reason for their defeat, him setting foot here meant he had voluntarily stepped into a place in which everyone wanted him dead. What is he thinking? The gathered nobles looked at each other. This was an unexpected situation where everyone was confused about what to do. It seems everyone is already gathered here. Ignoring the soldiers, Roman walked into the room with a calm expression on his face and said that. At that moment, Viscount Barco seriously thought, should I just kill him? He was already at the edge of destruction. And naturally, all he wanted was revenge by killing the man responsible for it. However, if he did that, he would lose his justification for taking down the Dmitri family. This was unmistakably a situation in which he needed to endure his anger. Viscount Barco, struggling to calm down his boiling anger, stared at Roman, who was sitting in front of him. No one had given him permission to sit, but he still took the seat as if it was his own. Sitting across from Viscount Barco, Roman leaned back on the chair as he crossed his legs and said, "I heard you had a lot of complaints about me." Lick. After caressing his bright and beautiful lips, Roman smiled like a predator who had caught its prey. And then, looking into the eyes of Viscount Barco, he said, "Then, tell me directly, for what reason Barco created this situation." Chapter 52. If you start something, you must see its end. Part 2. Hearing Roman's words, Viscount Barco's expression distorted instantly. Roman. Dimitri's remarks completely crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed, even if they were in a hostile relationship. You. How dare you show such an attitude and utter such words? Do you not know who I am? Viscount Barco and Roman Dmitri, they had different statuses. If Viscount Barco was the head of the family, then Roman was just a kid from a barren family who hadn't even obtained any title yet. Thus, such words were obviously offensive and meant to disregard Viscount Barco. Still, even a toothless tiger couldn't ignore the words of Roman, and being in front of other nobles, Viscount Barco was someone who especially couldn't accept them. Very well, I will tell you what you did wrong. You might have thought that you, a vulgar fool who knows nothing about the laws of nobles, could intervene in the wars of other people without a cause, but that isn't allowed in the Cairo kingdom. Why did you think Barco declared a territorial war? According to your logic, it would have been enough even if we attacked before Lawrence was prepared, but we did everything with nobles' laws and the central government's approval. The war with Lawrence was based on a long plan. Barco publicly announced the dispute based on the forged documents and emphasized that the cause was so huge that no one should intervene in the war between them. To him, it was a perfect plan. Even if people didn't like Barco's attitude, they couldn't haphazardly. Then, why? Viscount Barco couldn't even begin to understand why and how Roman Dmitri intervened in their battle. The nobles of Cairo aren't fools. A war without any cause in the noble society deserves a burial, and the Barco family will question your actions and make the Dimitri family pay the price for them. The Dimitri family cannot avoid this responsibility. No matter how great a family's name is, there is an implicit agreement between the neighboring nobles that a family that violates the nobles' laws will be destroyed. If you were maybe even a bit interested in the history of nobles, I wouldn't have had to say all of this. He raised his voice even more. Seeing Roman's calm expression despite all saying all that intertwined Barco's insights. You aren't going to use the excuse that you didn't know the laws of nobles, right? Do you finally understand how stupid you were? Because of you, your family will have to suffer now. That means that the Dimitri family, who have lived in peace despite having a fool of a son, will now be criticized by the nobles of the Northeast. Kwang. He pounded on the table. As he got up from his seat and exhaled deeply, Roman looked up at him and calmly asked, "All done?" "What?" Roman's voice was unbelievably calm. Even though a storm was raging within Viscount Barco, Roman was incredibly calm, looking around at the other nobles. "Then, from now on, I will tell you how and why I got involved in the war between Lawrence and Barco." The atmosphere subsided at Roman's words. Breaking through the tension where even the breathing sound felt heavy, Roman said in a sharp voice, "Lawrence and Dimitri were initially going to be married. However, I decided to break off our marriage due to undisclosed reasons, and in that way, I became a fool who suffered divorce." What do you think was the reason that happened? My reputation? My needs from a woman? Or simply because Miss Fiora Lawrence didn't like me? All of them are incorrect. Tap tap. He tapped his finger on the desk. Hearing that sound, the surrounding nobles became nervous. Barco's eldest son, Anthony Barco, threatened me to break up with her. Let's head back to the Barco family's second last banquet that I attended. I was acquainted with Anthony Barco, so even after promising to marry the daughter of Viscount Lawrence, I attended the banquet at his invitation. I even drank at his invitation, but that only led me into a trap. Drunk, I woke up in a room beside Emily Barco, and realized that Anthony had set up a trap to break Lawrence away from Dimitri. And as expected, Anthony Barco used that incident as an excuse to threaten to annul my marriage with Lawrence. Hearing Roman's words, the nobles were perplexed. If Roman actually broke off his marriage with Lawrence due to Anthony Barco's threats, then he obviously had a justified cause for intervening. The moment one bears their fangs at me, I pick them out and destroy the threat. At the time when he was once walking on thin ice in the demonic sect, Baek Jung-hyuk suffered all kinds of harm. Unlike Roman, who didn't even try to solve the problems even though his reputation was down to a ridiculous level, at that time, Baek Jung-hyuk solved his problems by facing them head-on. So what if he was a fool to others? His people trusted Baek Jung-hyuk with their lives, and the rumors about him slowly disappeared as he dealt with his enemies head-on. And just like that, Roman Dimitri also firstly blocked the cause of the threat. After all, he couldn't fall further than being a fool. Nevertheless, seeing the unusual situation, Viscount Barco shouted with his eyes red from anger, "Nonsense! Do you think anyone will believe that? Alright, I will call Emily Barco right now to check if what you said is really true. Everyone knows how disgustingly Dimitri's fool has lived all his life, but it is honestly disgusting to see you try and use your mouth to cover up the truth with lies. I knew you would say that. Had it been someone who would admit the truth instead of you, we would never have met in such a situation. Very well, I will take this opportunity to make things clear now. The reason I got involved in the war between the two estates wasn't to take revenge against Anthony Barco intimidating me, but something else. Something else? He has something else to say? Viscount Barco felt like he was drowning further down in the mud by the moment. Hearing the words of Roman and seeing his confident attitude, it felt like he was now playing into the palm of Roman. Nevertheless, Roman continued, everyone knew that Anthony Barco followed Flora Lawrence around. However, in the process, that man crossed a line he should never have. He tried to molest Flora Lawrence, but failed. And shocked by that incident, she decided to break up with me. The true reason for breaking off the marriage between Dimitri and Lawrence was that after going through such a thing, she didn't have the confidence to smile at the wedding. What did you? Do you think that is a lie, as well? Fine. Then, call in Emily Barco and Flora Lawrence, as well. They both will speak the truth. Roman had turned the situation into a mess. Just like Anthony Barco trapped and pulled him down, Roman did the same for him. However, the difference was that Roman could get his revenge right here, in the estate of Barco. It doesn't even matter if Emily Barco said 10 lies about Roman, Flora could do the same for Anthony Barco. Even the truth didn't matter in the current situation. As long as there was a justification for dispelling his opponent's words, Roman's plan would turn out to be successful. Also, firstly, Anthony Barco tried to molest Flora. Even if it wasn't as good or as plausible as Emily being beside me, he crossed a line as Flora was going to get married to someone. As I have revealed these actions in front of the other nobles, even Anthony's father, Viscount Barco, cannot completely believe his own son. Roman had mixed lies with the truth. And finally, he decided to strike the final blow. Anthony Barco touched my woman, who was promised to marry me. Now, I ask Viscount Barco and those gathered here, do you seriously think I had no reason to intervene in the war between Barco and Lawrence? I intervened in the war only with my own power, and not my family's power. That is the best I could do for Flora, whose side and feelings I didn't initially know, and to show her that I accepted the divorce without harsh feelings between us. It was a truly perfect hit, the argument made sense, and Roman showed his cause to others. Now, Viscount Barco wasn't the main character anymore. He was speechless. Cold sweat flowed down his forehead, and thousands of thoughts and calculations ran through his mind to try and find a solution to the current situation. There's no way out of this. Roman Dimitri had a perfect cause. Instead of cornering and taking revenge for Anthony's intimidation, Roman had a perfect reason for intervention in the war between Lawrence and Barco. In addition, Roman had intervened in the war entirely on his own, taking note that the issue might turn into a dispute between Dimitri and Barco otherwise. Now, there was nothing Viscount Barco could say. The moment Roman laid out his cause as revenge for the disrespect against Flora Lawrence, his future wife, it was evident that Barco would face irredeemable backlash and blame. Viscount Barco felt dizzy, and his mouth became dry. He is a true monster. The nobles who initially tried to help me have been completely swayed by Roman's words. They turned themselves away from Viscount Barco. They didn't want to fall like Barco by taking the wrong side, in case Roman's words were true. Now, the battle for the truth was meaningless. Even if he brought in Emily Barco, there was nothing he could gain anymore. There is only one way left for the Barco family to survive. Rather than giving a perfect excuse, I need to find a way to avoid this situation and find a new solution. Finally, as if nothing had happened, Viscount Barco calmed down and said, I do not think that what you have said is true. Just as Dimitri's fool denied the matters with Emily Barco, I think Anthony Barco would do the same. Thus, I will clearly confirm the truth about this situation and then contact you again. Sorry, everyone. I didn't call you all here for this. His words eventually faded. Flustered and embarrassed, he tried to hold on to the nobles, not wanting to lose hope. Seeing that, Roman smiled. He recalled the conversation he had with Chris the previous day. You really mean to go to Barco? That is suicide. Viscount Barco will not leave you alone. Roman's plan, hearing that he wanted to go to Barco, Chris panicked. It was actually natural. Roman, who had ruined Barco's plans, now wanted to go into his estate. It was crazy. However, Roman asked, Chris, what do you think my future relationship with Barco will be like? Barco definitely considers the Liege as their enemy by now. If the Liege hadn't intervened, they would have taken down Lawrence and walked into the estate, happy. However, even so, it doesn't make sense to touch an enemy with nothing to lose. If possible, it is better to avoid getting close instead. No. Until he reached the apex of the demonic sect, while slaughtering thousands of enemies, Baek Jun-hyuk established an iron rule. If we aren't the one who started it, it doesn't matter. However, remember this one thing, Chris, if you start something, you must see its end. We both know Barco will hold a grudge against me in the future. Then, it is best for us to uproot any problems, like the revenge they will try to take in the future, while they are in a mess. Back to the present moment. Roman looked at Viscount Barco and said in a low but terrifying voice, "Viscount Barco." Everyone's eyes were now focused solely on Roman. Viscount Barco momentarily tried to look good in front of the other nobles, but in fact, even he was stunned. Hearing Roman's call. "Choose, would you like to end this with Anthony Barco being punished for my personal conflict with him, or do you want to take things forward as a family matter?" With the word choose, Roman thrust his sword and placed it directly under Viscount Barco's chin. Chapter 53. If you start something, you must see its end. Part 3. Both of the choices Roman gave to Viscount Barco were horrible. He knew that he couldn't move according to his opponent's intentions. However, he also knew that Roman wouldn't allow him to move how he wanted to. I have directly presented two options to you. They are absolutely clear, and remember this, I won't allow any exceptions. If you don't choose the former option here today, as soon as I return to the Dmitri estate, I will speak with my father and tell him how I was threatened by your son, Anthony Barco. Obviously, after that, there will be no way you will be able to avoid a war with Dmitri. Anthony Barco's atrocities have already given me good cause to wage war on Barco, and the Dmitri family will not back down until Barco clearly shows their repentance. Roman blocked any way Barco could have used to get out of the current situation. Initially, Viscount Barco wanted to turn away from the reality in front of him. However, after a while, he realized he couldn't do that. I can never even dare to choose the second choice he gave me. If there was an actual war with Dmitri, the side that would obtain victory and the side that would be defeated were clear as crystal. Even if he ignored losing the war against Lawrence despite borrowing money from the Golden Bank, Barco wasn't so stupid that he would take the risk to wage war against the wealthiest man in the northeast region of Cairo. If he did that, it was evident that he would be defeated by an overwhelming margin. And even if it wasn't that, if the Dmitri family attacked Barco after they fell into the abyss, he was sure the Barco family would go extinct then. In the end, there was only one option left. Obviously, Roman was aware of this, as well, and that was exactly why he had presented those two choices to Barco. What he wants is for people to know that someone from Dmitri barged into Barco's estate by himself, and despite that, he got Barco on his knees. To come and punish the eldest child of Barco, Anthony Barco, in his own estate, will surely cause a huge mess within the nobles of the Northeast. Barco's defeat in the war has already led to their reputation being slumped, and he is planning to destroy any chance of it recovering in the future. Furthermore, the worst thing was that the current situation was taking place in front of Barco's last connections. Roman was practically mocking them in their own estate. I can't believe he was so cruel. This was like disembowelment suicide. Nevertheless, the only difference was that Roman was the one who held the hilt. Finally, Viscount Barco let go of his pride and put his head down. He decided to take responsibility for his defeat and bring out the eldest child so that he would get his punishment. He didn't say those words, but everyone around him understood the meaning of his actions. His eyebrows trembled. As Viscount Barco, who once boasted unrivaled power, was a prideful man, he couldn't simply bow down to a young man and completely let go of the pride he had built over many years. And then, he realized it, there was only one way left to protect his pride. And that was to prepare for the destruction of the Barco family by executing Roman, who barged into his estate fearlessly. However, he couldn't take that action as he wanted to live longer, albeit how brief it would be. Viscount Barco's strong desire to live eventually resulted in him accepting the reality in front of him. Anthony Barco's actions aren't a matter that should be escalated to a dispute between families. Thus, I will ask him to apologize directly. So, are we done now? By making the eldest son of Barco kneel down, is your anger finally appeased? He shouted. The chance for the revival of the family had already gone down the drain. So, Viscount Barco, who had lost everything, spoke desperately with red, bloodshot eyes. However, when did I ever say anything like wanting Anthony Barco to get down on his knees? What do you mean? How he has to be punished is in my hands. That choice obviously lies with me. Who in the world tells the perpetrator to choose the method of punishment for themselves? Roman's voice was unbelievably cold. Even after he had driven Viscount Barco to the edge of the cliff, as if he wasn't satisfied, he revealed his ferocious teeth and said, I want a duel of judgment with Anthony Barco. Duel of judgment. Hearing those words, Viscount Barco's expression turned stiff instantly. A duel of judgment wasn't a common thing. It was equivalent to public execution, a way for one to atone for their sins with blood and death by placing the wrongdoer at the crossroads of life and death. If Anthony had a duel of judgment with Roman, his chances of surviving against Roman were extremely slim. Does he want to kill my son right in front of me? No, that cannot happen. If that happens, Roman will not be able to survive either. I guess Roman is just expressing his opinion that just kneeling isn't enough for him to forgive Anthony for sins, and he wants him to be ready to be crippled. He is so fucking cruel. Even though the Barco family has given up their pride and bowed their head in front of him, he wants Barco to actually receive the price for Anthony's sins. Viscount Barco felt dizzy. He understood what Roman was asking him, will you risk the fate of the entire Barco family or abandon your eldest son? And obviously, Barco's answer was clear. Even though Anthony Barco was the eldest child who would one day succeed Viscount Barco, if he could avoid a war with Dmitri by abandoning his eldest son, it was a deal he needed to accept. He shut his eyes tightly. After losing the war with Lawrence, the debt he had to pay back was enormous, and albeit the choice to drive his son into a battle in which he would become limbless wasn't easy to accept, he had to accept the reality. After thinking for a long time, Viscount Barco told Roman he would accept his offer and left the conference room. Then, he told his son the truth about his future, who couldn't believe what he had just heard. Father. I am sorry. No. Never. Isn't Roman the person who won even against Homer in a one-on-one match? Are you truly going to put the life of Barco's eldest son into the hands of someone else? Please, decline his offer. He will never spare me. Anthony Barco got down on his knees. Weeping, terrified of Roman, Anthony grabbed Viscount Barco's clothes and begged him earnestly. He knew it as well, even if he survived the duel, there was no chance Roman would let him go back with a perfect body. Barco's eldest child, who his father thought had grown up with dignity, was now sobbing like a 3-year-old child and running away from reality. Seeing that, Viscount Barco said coldly, get yourself together. You are Barco's eldest son. From the moment you said you wanted to succeed and take the position of Viscount, you should have been prepared to do anything for the family's sake, even if that meant putting your life in jeopardy. Roman will not kill you. If he had come here to kill you, he would at least have come with an escort that would help him go back alive. Be strong and accept this reality. Look straight into the face of Roman Dmitri and never forget today's disgrace in order to get revenge against him in the future. Father, please. Anthony. Viscount Barco yelled sternly. Then, Anthony finally realized that the duel was unavoidable. Anthony Barco, who sat down on his seat, looked up at the sky, pale. Oh, God. From now on, all he could do was hope that Roman would show mercy to him. Anthony Barco, he was to be judged in front of Viscount Barco and the other nobles who attended the meeting. Tremble. His limbs were trembling crazily. His face looked as tired as a corpse, and his sword was shaking, as well. There was no meaning in this duel at all. Roman was someone who had defeated Homer with a single hit, so there was no way Anthony Barco, who didn't even know how to use aura, could survive this. However, he still decided to do this for a reason. He didn't swing his sword to defeat Roman, but tried to appeal to him. Roman. I am sorry for what I did to you. I had no malice while doing that. You see, I was in love with Flora Lawrence so much that my reasoning shattered for a moment when I was told she was going to be married to you." He said that in a desperate voice. It clearly showed that despite him not kneeling down, if Roman forgave him today, he would do anything for him in the future. "We are friends. Even if things got messy because of Lawrence, we still had pretty fun times together." "Roman, no. Sir Roman, please just let me off this one time. If you forgive me and let this go as if nothing happened, I, Anthony Barco, will never forget your grace and repay you for the rest of my life." It was embarrassing. What Anthony Barco was currently showing was something the eldest son of a noble family should never show. Naturally, all the other nobles looked at Viscount Barco, discomfort. The Viscount's face was red due to anger. He had already driven him into giving up his pride, but here, he was begging and crawling. "You will never forget this grace and repay me for the rest of your life?" Roman asked as he slowly walked towards Anthony Barco, who was startled and was holding the sword tightly. He knew he wouldn't be killed, but he didn't want to be crippled, either. His pale face showed how he was not even a little bit ready to accept the reality in front of him. Nevertheless, Roman continued, "How the hell are you going to repay me? The Barco family is already over. Even your connections with the central government cannot help rectify your crimes, and obviously, Barco will lose everything they have just by repaying the money they borrowed from the Golden Bank. So, tell me, why do I have to forgive you? You, who ignored me in front of countless others and trapped me with a selfish plan." At that moment, Viscount Barco had a strange feeling. An intense alarm rang in his head. And just as he was about to rush in and stop the duel, Roman looked straight into Viscount Barco's eyes and swung his sword. "That's right. There is no need for me to forgive you." Slash. With the wind blowing, the feeling of something being cut could be felt, as well. In the current situation, Viscount Barco's expression was stained with despair as blood splattered in the air. He didn't know Baek Jin-hyuk was someone who paid back things twofold. There was no way for someone who openly showed hostility toward him to stay alive, or even continue to live peacefully. Baek Jin-hyuk withstood the threats of his brothers who tried to assassinate him every night, thrust his sword into their hearts each time, and killed them. Then, one day, in a situation in which Baek Jin-hyuk was organizing his forces and himself to take on a good role within the sect, the eldest son, the strongest heir to the sect, came to him and said, "Jin-hyuk, do you know what your problem is? You don't show even the slightest bit of compromise. The moment you acknowledge someone as your enemy, you do not even intend to take advantage of them and decide to drive them to their end as soon as possible. One day, that trait of yours will come and bite you back. Even if they are weaker than you do not know what someone you consider your enemy and are sure to kill will do when they get cornered. That is the fatal problem with you." The eldest son, Baek Ho-yeol, was quite strong. Furthermore, beyond simply being strong, he showed the tolerance to accept those he once considered enemies under him. Truly, he was a great human being. Baek Jin-hyuk, as well, had no choice but to acknowledge him. However, that didn't mean that he agreed with everything Baek Ho-yeol chose to do. Covered in blood from top to bottom, Baek Jin-hyuk looked up at Baek Ho-yeol and said, "As you said, compromise is often required. However, if I see someone being hostile toward me, the only way for me to continue living peacefully is by crushing them down entirely. So don't say those words to me. I have lived like this from the time I was at the very bottom position in the demonic sect, and I will continue to live like this in the future, as well." Before reaching the peak, it was obvious that Baek Jin-hyuk would have to face a lot of enemies. However, if he killed everyone he met, obviously, karma would catch up to him. Thus, Baek Ho-yeol often tried to advise him by saying that, well, it wasn't as if he was utterly wrong. Those who were once Baek Ho-yeol's enemies had now become some of his most reliable allies. However, Baek Jin-hyuk's method for dealing with such situations was different. There was no reason to keep the enemy alive. Death was the only way to block the possibility of a variable, and moreover, he had earlier learned to use one's fear. The current situation wasn't much different. Barco would always think of themselves as the main characters. Also, Roman knew that if he showed Anthony mercy now, obviously, Barco would later again attempt to direct such a situation with forged documents. And finally, after finishing his thought process, quack, Roman Dmitri beheaded Anthony Barco. His face falling down the floor was simply stunned. While looking at Roman in disbelief, his body could only try to follow his last instincts, to try and stop the blood gushing out of his neck like a fountain with both of his hands. Thud. Finally, after his body knelt down, Anthony fell forward on his face. The death of Anthony Barco was a result that no one had expected to happen within the Viscount's estate itself. Chapter 54. If you start something, you must see its end. Part 4. Drip. Drip. Blood dripped down Roman's sword. Seeing the death of Anthony Barco, all the nobles who were present there were obviously shocked, and Viscount Barco was wailing. No. No. Grab. He hurriedly embraced Anthony Barco's limp body. His high-quality fabric clothes were wholly stained with blood, and Viscount Barco tried to stop the blood flowing from his son's neck, trembling. However, it was entirely meaningless. Although his son's body was still a bit warm, his eyes had already lost focus, and his arms had fallen down. Aha! Viscount Barco couldn't accept his son's death. He never imagined his son would be killed right before his eyes one day. Ah! What are you all doing? Kill this demon who dared to kill the eldest son of Barco, right now. Tear his limbs apart. Viscount Barco screamed. At the sight of him shouting out loud, looking like a madman, the knights of Barco hesitated. They all had witnessed Roman on the battlefield. Naturally, they weren't confident about rushing head first into the man who slaughtered the soldiers in the rear, took down the flare, and even killed Homer and Berga with a single slash. They were sure, whoever rushes at him first would definitely die. And due to the fear of death creeping into their bodies, and the shock of Anthony Barco's death, their loyalty was gradually faltering. Swipe. Roman wiped the blood off his sword. Then, he sheathed his sword, looked around, and asked everyone present, "Is there some problem? Isn't it normal for a criminal to die in the duel of judgment?" Viscount Barco was utterly mistaken. Roman offered a duel, but he never said he wouldn't kill Anthony Barco. Yes, it was a trap. Roman hadn't brought a single escort with him when he came to Barco. Being Viscount Barco, he thought Roman would choose to cut down a limb or something, at most. However, Roman had done something utterly different. Also, Roman had the right to do it as it was Viscount Barco himself who gave Roman the chance to punish his son. Thus, it couldn't be said that Roman was at fault for killing Anthony. He simply gave him the punishment he deserved. Roman warned those who were at a loss for words and couldn't decide what to do. From now on, keep in mind what I say. From the day Anthony Barco threatened me, I couldn't live under the same sky as him. I am just that kind of a person. I couldn't sleep without paying back for what I suffered, so I kept thinking about how to bring down the Barco family. The situation in front of you is the result of that. And if there are still some people left who won't leave Barco's side, look carefully at who you will be dealing with. Many say the cornered mouse bites the cat. Chris also dissuaded Roman for that reason, and in the past, Bec Hoyol warned him of that, as well. However, if one lets the mouse live due to the fear of being bitten, it will come back with a gang of its own to seek revenge on the cat. Thus, Roman never did that. Even if it meant his own flesh being torn apart and blood dripping down, it was something he would never do. He would never let the mouse get away. Viscount Barco was stunned. His eyes were burning with revenge as he shouted, "Do you think you will be fine after doing this?" Again. What do you even mean? From the moment I joined the war and went to Lawrence's side, it was clear that Barco and I would be enemies for the rest of our lives. And obviously, such a relationship will not change until you die, Viscount Barco. I will not be careless for even a single moment and carefully watch each step the Barco family takes, and I also plan to keep attacking until Barco is wholly destroyed. On the surface, it was a threat to Barco, but those who were wise knew that it was a warning to all the nobles who were present there. Roman was showing them how dangerous it would be if they tried to help the Barco family even a little bit. It was a warning that if anyone tried to support or stay by Barco's side while Roman was attacking, he would destroy them without any hesitation, as well. Naturally, at Roman's warning, every noble decided to give up on Barco. They just kept their mouths shut. Even the knights of Barco only held their swords, but didn't rush forward. I will leave for now. He took a step back and walked through the front door alone. Although blood dripped down the path Roman was walking, no one dared to stand in his way. And just like that, leaving behind Viscount Barco, who was screaming, he disappeared wholly. Next, Barco's collapse was instantaneous. Angered by his son's death, Viscount Barco tried to get revenge, but all reactions he got back were as cold as frozen ice. I am sorry. However, as you know, we are not confident enough to help Barco against Dmitri. I admit that we had a good relationship, but Barco touched an extremely dangerous enemy. They all drew a line. Even for nobles like them, Roman's actions were too shocking. He stepped into the estate of Barco on his own and killed Barco's son right before his eyes. It was an act that instilled fear into everyone who was there. Roman Dmitri made it clear that he didn't intervene in Lawrence and Barco's affair just because of impulsive decisions but because he wanted revenge and had a clear cause. Anthony Barco's threat had led to an ugly outcome. And Viscount Barco's judgment had resulted in the duel itself. Thus, the nobles who were once on Barco's side instead turned into witnesses of Roman's actions and told others that Roman had a good cause. Thus, Barco had no way left to get outside help. After his son was killed, Barco lost his reasoning, and he even ran and begged other nobles, but no one helped him. His connections in the central government weren't much different either. Even though they had known each other for quite a while, they were reluctant to side with him and said the incidents had made the situation quite difficult. And like that, Barco's connections and plans were obliterated. Obviously, Roman's judgment was correct. When a cornered rat is completely trampled on, there was no way, even for someone like Viscount Barco, to overcome the crisis. Also, there are only 3 days left until the time you promised to pay back the principal and interest comes. If the payment isn't made by then, the Golden Bank has no other way but to exercise its rights. Viscount Barco, you have 3 days. Even if you have to sell your soul to the devil, be sure to pay back the money. An ultimatum arrived. As Viscount Barco knew about the infamy of the Golden Bank, famous for collecting back its money by any means, he realized that it was all over for him now. The greed for Lawrence's land had caused a disaster for Barco. Seeing the desperate reality, he had no other choice but to use his last resort. A few days later, Viscount Barco attempted to escape at night. Even though he fled with minimal luggage and items, he was found dead in an unknown mountain. It was the moment the Barco family, one of the most prestigious in the Northeast, were wholly destroyed, in vain. It was a moonlit night. Hans, out in the hallway, asked the man who was shining under the moonlight, "Where are you going out at night?" "Halt." The man stopped walking. Then, Roman, the man, turned his head and looked at Hans. "The moonlight is bright. It has been a while since I went out for a walk." "Is that so?" Hans laughed softly. Then, he walked over to Roman, took out a handkerchief from his pocket, and wiped off the red stain on Roman's clothes. "Everyone is truly worried. It is a pleasure to see you being recognized by others, but I cannot help but be anxious, as well, because you are doing dangerous things like war. Young master, you are the eldest child of the Dmitri family. As you are the one who will inherit the estate someday, you should think more about your precious life. Always be careful. And if you need help, do tell me. I am always ready to do my best for you." Swish. Hans kept cleaning the stain. It was only when the stain was off that he looked at Roman proudly. Seeing that look, Roman said, "Hans, tell me, young master, I told you before. You are my person. I remember that. Starting a new life in this world, Roman accepted Hans as his first person. That meant his relationship with Hans was quite special. As he was the heavenly demon, Baek Jung-hyuk, he slaughtered numerous people before he obtained that position. He lived a life filled with so much carnage that his enemy's blood was enough to make a sea. Obviously, it wasn't a life any normal human could live. People often called him a vicious demon because of how terribly he trampled on his enemies. However, he was always surrounded by people. Why? It was because of his most important principle: he always did his best for those who were in his circle. In fact, it was so much that he had done much more for one person in his circle rather than what he had done for hundreds and thousands of enemies combined. And obviously, each person in his circle was important to him. That was enough for everyone. He was convinced that if he had let Barco get away after their threats, his circle would have become a mess. I, as well, will do my best not to put my people at risk. The Barcos were no longer a threat. Why? Because the dead cannot do anything. After that, Roman turned around and went into the room. Squeak. Thud. Hans stood there watching the door Roman had disappeared into for a long time. The capital of Cairo, Kairos. A piece of unbelievable news arrived at a place where large crowds from all over the kingdom often gathered. Is this the truth? Yes. I couldn't believe it at first either. However, many witnesses had seen Homer get defeated in the Battle of Great Warriors. Isn't that really amazing? A guy named Roman Dmitri, an unknown person whose name is not known anywhere, and even far from being listed on the rankings, defeated a 4-star swordsman with one hit. Priest Willis, who managed the Valhalla Temple's branch in Cairo, frowned hearing what the fuss was all about. It can't be possible. Rank 49, Homer, a deity-like being whom the Temple of Valhalla had been keeping a close eye on recently, was killed by an unknown person? Even if it was true, the problem was the opponent's identity. The northeast region of the Cairo kingdom was so remote that no one even bats an eye on it, so he couldn't imagine someone so strong originating from there and even being strong enough to defeat Homer with a single hit. Who was Roman Dmitri? Had he heard his name even once in his entire life, he could have tried to comprehend the shocking news. After a while, Willis said, "What is certain is that Roman Dmitri is 25 years old. And if this report is true, it means that an unprecedented genius has been born in the Cairo kingdom. We need to check these facts first. No matter how likely it is a lie, the ripple effect that will arise from this cannot be ignored." The Valhalla Temple belonged to the Valhalla Empire and usually managed the rankings through ranking battles. Still, it was necessary to mobilize manpower in situations like the current one. Honestly, they were all interested. Was this just a baseless rumor? Or was this the birth of a monster-like genius? They wanted to see the face of Roman Dmitri. Go get your bags right now. Yes. However, they didn't know it back then. From the northeast region of the Cairo kingdom, the wind which would one day significantly change the entire salamander continent was blowing. Thus, a sharp awl began to pierce the pocket of peace, albeit little by little.